few weeks ago, we had a Build Your Own Theology class here at this church, and one of the participants, Betsy Enger, will now read the credo she wrote for this class. Betsy recently became a member of this church, and I think we are so truly lucky to have her.
Hi. As I was listening to the poem, I thought back in my childhood. I was raised Catholic, went to public school, but when we went to catechism, I was very worried because we were told not really the difference between a venial and a mortal sin. So anything I did wrong, it really worried me. But then one of the nuns told us that if you only commit venial sins, you go to purgatory and have a chance to get into heaven. And I was thinking, gee, they have to pray for me to get to heaven, and I don't know very many people. And how many people does it take and how long to get a poor soul out of purgatory up into heaven? So it was always kind of a negative feeling that I had to be really good so that I could get out of there as soon as possible. Now, for my credo, as a young adult, many, many years ago, I came to the conclusion that I could no longer be a part of an organized religion. It seemed to me that the rules set forth by the various churches were based on the premise that people lacked goodness and the church would straighten them out. I also thought that people of influence didn't have to follow the rules. They could buy their way into heaven. I strongly believe that church and state should be separate. I have never been able to say the Pledge of Allegiance the way it's supposed to be said. I'm sorry, but I leave out God, and I say justice for some. From time to time, I have sought out programs that include positive messages without a religious premise. I became desperate when Donald Trump came on the scene. I began my journey by going online to find lectures promoting being kind to one another. I listened to several positive talks by various people. When I heard Reverend Sean speak, it led me to visit the Unitarian Universalist Church, and I have trouble saying that. It's too long for me. But here in Costa Mesa. I felt uplifted after each sermon and decided to continue attending this church as often as possible. It then became time to solidify my belief system, and I enrolled in the Building Your Theology program. The information from this program has sparked a deeper understanding of my spirituality. I've had a very positive experience in the class and have great respect for all who participated. Our leader, Rica, helped to make it more comfortable for me to share thoughts with the rest of the class. These are thoughts that I had always kept to myself. Now, all my beliefs. I believe in science. And I believe there are many things way above my ability to comprehend. I believe people have the right to their own belief system, but do not have the right to impose it upon others. I believe people should do the right thing, even if it does not benefit them. I believe one of the very important functions of government is to protect the powerless from the powerful. I believe giving is much more important and gratifying than taking. I believe humans should never harm animals through greed. I believe all humans equally share this earth and all should be treated as equals. I believe that, I might get in trouble here. I believe that where am I here? I believe that most women who attain power are there to get things done. However, too many men who attain power seem to be there for the glory. I'm sorry, I believe that most women, I already did that. I believe we don't always understand how we influence others, and that behooves us to be a positive role model. I believe that being respected is more important than being liked. I believe we have a sacred duty to protect our environment for future generations. As an animal rights person, I believe there is way too little compassion for and a total disregard for the rights of animals. I believe the justice system in the United States is tilted towards the rich and powerful, and I am so pleased to have found this church. It sure took me a long time, I'm a slow learner. It embodies all that a church should be. I joined the church on April 28th, 2019, and I thank you for listening to me.
Our next song is going to honor several different paths to God. Please stand as you're comfortable. We're going to bring Amy and Phil and Sherry back out, and we're going to teach each section your part. It's very simple. The first part is La ilaha illallahu. It goes like this. La ilaha illallahu. La ilaha illallahu. That's very good. The next one is a Buddhist chant. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Only one note, you've got that. Well, the next group is two traditions, Judaism and Hinduism. Shalom Shanti. Shalom Shanti. Shalom Shanti. Good, very good. Now everyone knows their parts. Part already knows their part. So we'll get it started with Amy, and then we'll build it. I'll tell you when to go. La ilaha illallahu. La ilaha illallahu. La ilaha. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 Om Mani Padme
Sometimes the truth our very own truth that we haven't even told ourselves yet, just falls out of our mouth like a strange, wondrous thing. Sometimes we open our mouth and words tumble out and they stand in front of us and we marvel at it, saying, I did not know that was in me. Has that ever happened to you? Of course, it never happens when we are by ourselves, where we could sit with it and ponder what it means. It never happens quietly. Of course it doesn't. The truth tends to be a bit of a diva like that. Once it happened to me when I was still a worship associate at my home church. We were talking about world religions, and I was giving a reflection about Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, with their shared vision of a paternal God. You know what I mean. Human form, omnipotent, protective, and at times punitive. Most likely male, at least in the original conception. God as a father. Anyway, I'm up there talking about a paternalistic vision of God, and I say something like, I just don't believe, I don't know what the actual context of that sentence was. But in that moment, as I heard myself saying these words, I was struck so deeply by this truth. I just don't believe. I just don't believe in that God. Oh my God, I'm an atheist. Mind you, I was still in the pulpit, in the middle of the service, in the middle of my reflection. And while I did not exclaim out loud that I just figured out my whole belief system, people afterwards asked me what happened. Apparently, for an instant, my whole face just slipped a few inches. Anyway, I was okay being an atheist. And the UU church felt like an okay place for being an atheist. All was good. I wouldn't have to surprise myself anymore. I had it figured out. Or so I thought. And then, a couple of years later, I took my child to Pride in Long Beach. Surprising things always happen at Pride. As every year, there was the parade and the people on the sidelines, and as every years, there were also the haters with their God hates you signs, lined up right there at the beginning of the parade, spewing venom at those celebrating. And as always, I had planned on just ignoring them. So Elisa and I walk by, trying to get far away. They have their God hates you signs. They're spewing their venom. I'm all decked out with rainbow garb, holding my child's hand. And then, to my own surprise, and most certainly that of my kid, I suddenly found myself standing face to face with one of the equally surprised sign bearers. And I was yelling at the top of my voice, "Don't you know that God is love? Don't you know that?" I suddenly felt that if they get to have God, then I get to as well. In fact, it felt like an imperative to me to set the record straight. And this feeling, this defense of God, my right to God, my knowing that God is love, came from a feeling somewhere deep down inside me, buried but elemental. And when I came home that day, I thought, well, shucks, I guess I'm not an atheist. And somehow, grappling with that realization was much harder for me. I did not want to believe in God. I did not really feel okay being a theist. And I also wasn't quite church that the UU church felt quite as much like an okay place to be a theist. And as I pondered this, I had a really painful realization. It wasn't just me trying to reject the concept of God. It was me feeling rejected by the concept of God, or at least by its self-appointed spokespersons. I'm sure I'm not the only person in this room who has felt diminished and rejected by other religious communities and what they claim to be God. I have a feeling that the majority of people gathered here in this room are not UUs born and raised, but people who, like me, found their way here after other faith communities failed them. I remember in particular how I was kicked out of Bible study when I was in college. Having just arrived from Germany to the rural Midwest, one of the campus churches quickly lured me into their Bible studies. They promised they'd meet weekly to discuss the Bible, and I was all for that. I was like, that sounds great. The discussion wasn't quite what it turned out to be, and after a few of these meetings, I was asked to leave and never to return. It wasn't funny, I was really sad. And on my way out, I was told that I probably should not call myself a Christian ever again. And that stung, because at that time, I really did call myself a Christian. And I think it was that experience that made me stop using God as a term or a concept, because it made me feel defensive. I did not want to be rejected again. And I'm sure that this story is one of the milder ones in this room. I know there are some people in here carrying God's scars with them that go much, much deeper. Being rejected by God is devastating, and it is hard to recover from. But in that situation, when I was publicly kicked out of Bible study, when I was told I did not belong, I didn't have a right to call myself a Christian, and I certainly did not have a right to God, it was not actually God rejecting me. It was people rejecting me. People who claim God, hoard God, use God as their own personal weapon. People who apparently don't believe or understand that God is love. And from these people, I am reclaiming God. I'm not reclaiming a benevolent universe or the spirit of life. I am reclaiming God. God is mine as much as God is theirs. My vision of God may be a very, very different one. I personally still don't believe in a God as a father or mother or any human form for that matter. But my version of God is just as good and as valid as theirs. Now, before we go on, I want to remind you of one of the things our amazing, brilliant coming of ages said during last week's service. Joel said in his credo, I value Unitarian Universalism because it, intentionally or unintentionally, avoids the trap of proclaiming in its ministers the authority of God. Let me repeat that. I value Unitarian Universalism because it, intentionally or unintentionally, avoids the trap of proclaiming in its ministers the authority of God. It's one of the things I value too. And what it means right now is that my talking about God, my feelings about God, have no authority on how you should feel about God. You get to believe what you believe, regardless of what I say. Most of our youth stated in their credos that they do not believe in God. Betsy stated that she believes in science. And I'm not here to convince any of them or any of you that you should reclaim God for yourself or for your own belief system. What I am asking of all of us, though, is that we slowly move towards reclaiming the conversation and some of the vocabulary. I would love for us to be able to talk as freely and as comfortably about God, religion, and prayer as we talk about atheism, spirituality, or meditation. First of all, I think it's important, if we truly want to be inclusive of everyone, if we want UU churches to feel as much like no play place for theists as it does for atheists, and I mean all theists, including the ones who do believe in the traditional God, whatever that might mean for them. In fact, I would love for all of us to find out what that means for them in their daily lives, and to have that conversation free of judgment on either side. And I want for our children and youth to grow up knowing that even if they find room in their heart for God and Jesus one day, there will still be room for them in our church. We often say we want to hear more from the liberal Christians. Why don't they comment on what's going on? Some of those liberal Christians might be right here with us. And I wonder if we are listening to them, if we're giving them room to say what they want to say. If we really lean into our third principle, acceptance of one another and encouragement to a spiritual growth in our congregations, we need to be able to speak freely of theology and spirituality, to have these conversations so we may truly and actively accept and encourage each other in our spiritual growth. And for that, I wish we could truly reclaim some of the religious vocabulary that we so often shy away from. God, prayer, sin, grace, brokenness, redemption, glory. And make that vocabulary ours again, even if we have previously been hurt by it. Because I believe that words have power. And religious words have tremendous power. And right now, in this country, in this moment in time, we let the wrong people wield that power. Jonathan Merritt, a fairly liberal Christian writer, bemoans the decline of sacred speech in our daily lives. He says, if we do not use sacred words, then our minds will be less attuned to transcendence. If we do not have spiritual conversations, then we'll be less shaped by our spirituality. And if moral language is vanishing and with the decline of words like grace, mercy, honest, courage, and wisdom, then we can expect that our communities and our culture will reflect this shift. What we say or write and what we hear or read is important. It shapes how we perceive the world. And maybe some of these words, some of these concepts that if we allowed ourselves to explore them, could enrich our perception of the world and our role in it. How do we address spiritual evil right now? How does redemption look like? What does redemption look like? How do we keep feeling that we are never enough if maybe, just maybe, we were made in God's image? And how can we put children in cages if maybe they too were made in God's image? And what would it mean, really truly mean, right now, to be a devout Unitarian Universalist? What we say and what we write and what we hear and what we read is important. And it is also important because it shapes how others perceive the world. Having a shared vocabulary with those who we deem so different can be a good way to bridge the gulf that separates us, to start the conversation, even if the meaning, the way we use these words differs. Because it is only once we started a conversation that we can listen to each other and hear what each of us means. And there's a good chance that some of the people who are listening will be the people who are also currently hurt by these words, these concepts, and who long for nothing more than hearing them used differently. I recently talked to our very own Ralph Haller, and he said, words don't mean, people mean. Words and concepts have the meaning we all give them, individually but also collectively out in the world. And I really, really want us to be part of that meaning-making conversation about God, about religion, and about spirituality, because I truly and deeply believe that we have important and good things to say. And if the world could be shaped by our contributions, it would be a better and a kinder world. So I invite all of us to do some serious meaning-making together, to start talking about these words and these concepts again. Soul, sin, good and even, heaven, angels, and being a devout Unitarian Universalist. Whatever you want to add to your list. and then sit with them. Reacquaint yourself again and explore not only what they meant for us in the past, but what they can mean for us and the world right now and in the future. And I so hope we can reclaim these words, use these words, be enriched by these words, regardless of what we believe personally, so that we can wield their power to shape a world not devoid of religious and spiritual language, but a world in which religion and spirituality and all the concepts that come with it, prayer, grace, brokenness, redemption, and yes, maybe for some of us, God, are becoming forces of love and healing and good. May it be so, and blessed be.
Please rise and bow your head.